recorded, so you're going to see a little notification that a recording is going to be happening here. So a couple things to start with. One is when you open up Bluebeam, it's going to look something like this, right? It's going to have a default look to it. Maybe you've already customized it. And all that customization that happens, the look of your screen, all of that change that happens by using the profile. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to change the profile to use the Sand Island profile. But before you do that, if you have any customization that's happened, let's say that you've added your own buttons or something like that, one of the first things you're going to want to do is you're going to want to come here to Review, and then down to Profiles, and then see where it says Save Profiles right here. You're going to want to first save whatever profile you have active. That way that if you decide to come back to that profile later, let's say that I had changed this one, you want to come back to it later, then at least you have the profile that you had before. Once you've done that, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to find that profile that we should have maybe loaded already. If it's not loaded, I'm going to show you how to load it. If you don't have access to that profile through the email that was sent by TP, the email was sent a couple days ago. The subject line, I think, is Bluebeam profile. If you don't have that file, then you can find actually here in the chat, you can see that if you scroll up to the beginning, you can see that I've actually sent out that profile. So you have access to it that way as well. So all we're going to need to do with this profile, once you have it in your email, you've downloaded it maybe to your desktop or wherever, it doesn't really matter, just double click it. And when you double click it, what should happen is that it'll import itself into Bluebeam. So when you double click that profile BPX file, you'll get a message that the profile was imported successfully. And when you import that profile, then you'll see the look has changed a little bit here for Bluebeam. So you'll see some buttons over here on the left or on the right, that maybe were on the left before. What I always tell people when we do any kind of Bluebeam training or when you're doing any kind of Bluebeam, whether it's the old or new version, is don't focus on what where these buttons are located, like this studio button, for example. Focus on what they look like. So the look of this button is much more important than the location of it, because these buttons can move around to any location on the screen. Okay, so now that your Bluebeam looks something like this, the next thing we need to do is we need to make sure that everyone has their account set up in Bluebeam. So what I want everyone to do first is to find this studio button. It's the one that looks like a little house right here. And what I want you to do, I'm going to mute some people here who are making noise in the background. What I want you to do here is find the studio, and it should look something like this. If this is, and notice that I can slide these in and out. I think you guys are somewhat experienced. You know some of this stuff. Click the sign in button, and I need everyone to sign in to Studio. Now, if you don't think that you have an account, if you think maybe, oh, I don't have an account, I've never done this before, then you can go ahead and hit the button over here on this side to create an account. And what that will do is it'll just have you fill in your information. You have to create a somewhat complicated password with uppercase and lowercase, but the rest of it is just your name and your email. One thing that's important for those of you creating a new account, probably the most important thing, and what we're going to do for anyone who has an account already, you guys should be trying to figure out what your password is at this point. If you've forgotten it, you can always hit forgot password and reset it through your email. So we're going to eventually get everyone signed in. So if you think you have an account already, then right now you should be over here in the sign in, and you should be working on figuring out your password. For the rest of us who are creating the account, one thing that's probably one of the most important things is this display name right here. So as you're entering your first and last name and your email, that's pretty straightforward. But The display name needs to read like your email signature. So for me, it would be my first and last name. And so this isn't like an abbreviation of your name. It's not just your first name or your email address or anything else. Your display name should be your first and last name, and then after it, a little space and a hyphen and a space, and then whatever company you're with. So for me, it's AECOM. Some of you, it may be Stantec or some other company. So put your full name, a space, and then the name across here if you're creating an account. Once you create an account, you'll get an email verification that you'll need to do really quick. And once you've done that, then we'll be able to sign in. So all of us now should, again, be at the point where we're ready to sign in to Bluebeam Studio. So let's talk about signing in here. And I'm just going to check really quick just to make sure there aren't any questions. Again, if you have a question, you can try and chat it into me here in the chat box, and I will try my best to get it for you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put in my password. And everyone else should do their password and probably check this box to keep yourself signed in. And now hopefully all of us will be kind of at the same point where we've all signed in. Now we're not done yet. We need to do a couple more things. One is come out just very first thing, let's go out to a web browser and go to a web browser and type in studio.bluebeam.com. So you can see studio.bluebeam.com right here, and go ahead and hit enter. And it's going to ask you again to sign in. So once you've already signed in to Bluebeam, the software, go out to a Chrome browser or whatever and do the same exact thing. Put in your email and put in your password and go ahead and sign in again. And because we want to check something over here. And where we want to check first is in the My Profile section. So here, what you want to do is you want to, again, set that default name so that it looks correct, right? It should be your first and last name and then a space, hyphen space, and then your name, or sorry, your company that you're with. Click Update Profile once you've done that, and then you can go ahead and close the browser out. So that's really important, and we're going to see in a second here how many of you are actually doing this, following along, because I'm going to have you all log in, and we're going to see why it's important. But before we do that, we need to make a few more changes. So I'm going to assume now that here in Bluebeam Studio, you've successfully signed in. And again, you can always sign out and sign back in with this studio icon here. But now what we're going to do is we're going to go to Review, and we're going to go here to Preferences. So again, Review on the left-hand side and then Preferences. And that username that we put in before with the first name, the last name, the space, and the company, we need to do that another time. So we need to do that right here. So hit Control-C or paste that in. Maybe you want to copy it because we're going to be doing this one more time. And make sure this reads here, and then come over here to Studio and go to Servers. And in Servers here, one last time, you need to make sure it's set correctly. So one of the important things that we need to do is we need to be able to identify the people who are making the comments, and that's how it's done. So again, it's coming here to Review and then Preferences, and then in Studio, Servers, you set the name there, and in General, you set the name there. One last thing we need to do here in Preferences, so everyone come back to Preferences if you're not already here, is to go to Tools and to go to the auto size text box and check that little text box right here. So just check that auto size text box, check that in the tools, and that will be good for everybody. Okay, so we have, hopefully, everyone has successfully set up the profile. I'm going to see if there are any questions. Doesn't look like there are any questions here. So we'll keep going. And what we're going to do next is now that we've logged into Studio, now that we have a Studio account, I want everyone to log into one of the training session that I had created here. So we have our profile installed. Hopefully Studio will be here on the right-hand side. If not, just look for that button and log into your account and go ahead and let's go to sessions. And here in sessions, you're going to click the little plus sign. Now, normally, the way you get invited to a session is you just get a hyperlink that's emailed to you. But in this case, there is, I'm not doing that for you guys. I'm just going to have you join kind of the old-fashioned way, which is just to come here to sessions, click the plus sign, and join in. So let's talk about what you're doing here. Bluebeam, the reason that you're using Bluebeam and not Adobe, and the reason Bluebeam is different from Adobe is because it has this built-in Studio component, which is a cloud component. So this allows everyone to connect into what's called a Bluebeam session. And that Bluebeam session is kind of like what we're doing now. It's kind of like everyone seeing the same screen. It'll allow everyone to see the same PDF file. So the PDF will be loaded for the review, and then you'll be able to join in. So the session we're joining in is this one right here, this secondary training. And so what you're going to do right here is you're going to type in 959-220-463. So you can, that's again 959-220-463. So you can do it, you see, without the spaces. If you want, you can add the little hyphens. It does not matter. But what we all want to do now, what I want everyone to do, is to come to Studio, if you can, come to the Sessions button right here, click the little plus button to join, and then once you see the join screen, plug in these 959-220-463. So we're going to see how many of you are actually online here. And that way now, what I can see, what this is going to show me, is it will show me the people who actually did the first part, right? So when I went through these preferences, and when I went through the setup of the username, and then we went, to Studio and we set the username here. If you didn't do that, if you did not do that, or if you did that without your company, then it's going to show up here. So I'm seeing a couple people who actually did it correctly here. We have Chris, Kyle, good job. The rest of you, rewatch this video because all of these technically are incorrect. The default is just going to be your kind of email, first part of your email address like this. And what we need to do is we need to change that so ideally it has your first and last name. That way when someone is trying to figure out who you are, they don't just see PJG, they actually see your full name. Okay, but I'm glad a lot of you were able to join this okay. So here in the session, everyone, you'll see there's one document here under documents. Let's have everyone just go ahead and open that document up. And we're going to take you through just a little bit of the customization that we put in place. So I'm assuming most of you have used Bluebeam before, but it's important to note a couple things. And I can see now, you see how I can see you guys all opening up this file here. So like, for example, when Lloyd opens this file, I'll actually be able to see that he's opened the file. So, excuse me. So everyone, looks like most of you have this file open now. So you've come here to Documents, right here. So again, we're in Studio, we're in the session, we're in the Documents. We've clicked to open this document. Notice there's no save button up here. Because we're in a studio session, anything that you do, any markup that you make on here will be automatically saved. You don't have to worry about saving it. So I want to point out a couple things that are maybe a little different that you don't always get to see when you're looking at drawings. And that is over here on the left-hand side now, you see the thumbnails. One thing about the thumbnails that's a little different is that each sheet is actually named. So you're not seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're seeing actually the sheet, the page number and everything. And you know, those of you who've ever used Adobe, I'm sure are familiar with this, right? This is pretty standard. But one thing you may not be familiar with is the bookmarks right here. So you see this, again, when you're thinking about these, think about what these buttons look like rather than where they're located. But this particular one looks like a little book, a little bookmark, pretty self-explanatory. When you click on that, you're going to see kind of like the sheet index, right? Kind of like this index of pages. You're going to see all these pages set up for you so you can click on them very easily and go to these plans. Now, one thing, you know, when I roll this up, and for us to save time, I know it takes a little while to download these files, so I didn't put the full set. The full set's over 500 pages. I just basically stuck the first 40 pages into this training set right here for you guys. So this is a training session and a training set of drawings. You can do whatever you want. There's no damage that you're going to do by messing up in here. But notice here in the bookmarks, which is this button right here, you can easily go between pages. So it saves you maybe having to, you know, maybe having to go page by page through these and try and figure out where your stuff is, right? It's going to be a lot easier than using these. Here you can just go ahead and click. So what we're going to do is let's have everyone right now go to page G19 right here. So everyone's got this open. Go ahead and go to page G19. And again, in the bookmarks here, you can pretty quickly get to that. And the next thing I want you guys to do is this little markups list at the bottom. So this thing may be hidden kind of out of the way, but you see how I can drag it up? We want to bring this up a little bit so we can see our markups when we make them. So again, notice when I hover over this, it turns blue, and if I click it, it goes away. But then you're like, well, where did it go? So you do have to kind of come down here and click on this, and when you click on it, you see it reappears. What you can also do is, if you want, you can see that blue and then drag up from the bottom. So I want everyone to have your markups list kind of, you know, maybe a third of the way up the screen so you can kind of see once we make a markup here. And then once you've done that, we're going to come up here to the left-hand side, and we're going to go to the tool chest. So you can see again the tool chest. Don't make any marks yet. I know you're all very eager probably to make some kind of comment, but don't make one yet. I want to just say one more thing before we do. I turn you guys loose. Is, you know, again, look at this. Make sure you remember what this looks like, because you're gonna want to find that later. Okay, so what I want everyone to do is I want everyone to go ahead and make a markup. But before you make that markup, before you start typing in here on this page, I want you to think about the fact that this bit of the comment that you make may be exported out to, at some point in the future, it might be exported out and given to the client as a separate maybe spreadsheet or something. So as you're pointing at something, as you're asking for something to be fixed or improved or whatever, don't just point at something and say, fix this, or, you know, point at something and say, this is wrong. What we need everyone to do when they're making these comments is to actually write something that's somewhat concise. So, you know, you don't have to say, like, you know, on page G19, this is wrong, but what you need to say is, like, you know, some sort of complete sentence that outlines what the problem is so that if someone was reading this independent of the drawings, they might still be able to understand what's going on. So what I'd like everyone to do here is you can go ahead and you can pick any one of these into tools in the tool chest, and go ahead and come up here with your text box and go ahead and make a markup and say whatever you'd like. You know, if you want to zoom into the drawing and you want to make a comment specific to the rotary drum dryer, for example, you want to say that that's incorrect, go ahead and type that in. So you can do a call out, you can do whatever type of message you want. Please update sheet. I'm going to just make it short and sweet. So now one thing that I'll be able to tell for some of you is if you're using the correct tool chest. Number one, I know a lot of you, when you're doing this, you're probably used to coming up here to tools and going to markup. Don't do that. In fact, don't ever do that again. Don't ever do this again. Just come to the tool chest and use the tools that are given to you in the tool chest. That way you at least get an idea of the fact that you're using the right tool in the right color. So I can see a lot of comments are being made here. And again, now that these are being made, you can kind of see the comments that have been made. If I organize this based upon date here, so that I can kind of get all the recent ones here, you can see all of these. You know, it's all happening in real time because we're in a studio session. Now, one thing to note, wow, that's some interesting creative comments here. Okay, one thing to note, like for this comment, for example, so this was made by PJG. You see how this didn't shrink down? That's because what everyone needs to make sure they do is they come up here to review and preferences, and PJG, especially you should do this. Go to preferences and go to tools and check this box that says auto size text box. And that way, when the reason that you need to check that box is so that when you make a comment like this, it doesn't end up being a gigantic square with a little bit of text inside. So I think everyone's sort of been able to make a comment without any trouble. That's the easy part of this whole software application. Again, when you're making these comments, you'll see that all of these, I can see them, you're all seeing, all of us are doing this in real time, collaborating simultaneously. So now that everyone's made a comment, what I want you to do is I want you to come in here and locate your comment. And again, if you wanted to get fancy, you could start to, you could just sort by clicking here and then find your particular comments. Or if you wanted to, you see how I just clicked on creation date, and that allowed me to get to the comments really quickly and see everyone's comments here at once. Even if you wanted to filter, for example, you could filter, and then by filtering, you could only view maybe your comments if you were just looking for your own here by clicking on your name, and that would filter out everybody else's. But for the most part, as we're working through, we're going to be locating our own comment. And when we find our, oh, that's perfect, perfect. See, look at that. See, he's already did that, and that's looking a lot better. Okay, so once you find your comment, and everyone hopefully has made at least one comment, once you find your comment, I want you to come over here to status. So we're looking down here in the markups list, and notice when you click on your comment here, it highlights it. So whatever you choose right here gets highlighted here, which is really nice. So you find your thing. And one thing to note is with this status column, this is something that's a little different. So as I scroll down here, you'll see this is filled in by a lot of people. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But everyone should be able to come to a status, and I'm going to go ahead and go to my comment right here and double click right in here. So double click, and when you double click, you're going to see a whole bunch of menu choices. It's kind of like a pick list. So let me just take you through what this means. Don't click on any of these just yet, but I'll have you do it in a second. So when the originator, the AE, makes a comment, then, or when the originator creates the set of drawings, what's going to happen is you guys as reviewers are going to come in here and add a comment, right? And if I came in here and added a comment, please update sheet, as that would go back then to the AE, the originator of the document, and that person would either agree with that comment, that they'll do it, or disagree that they won't, and they'll tell you here that they'll agree or disagree. And then you as the reviewer at some point can come back in here as well and say that this has been reconciled. Let's say that you guys have a phone call, a conversation where you determine it's going to be fixed. This is kind of like, we're kind of creating a record here of what's happening with each one of these comments, so that eventually as the reviewers, you can kind of come in here and you can go to your back check and you can go ahead and close this out. So go ahead and pick on one of your comments and then come here to status, the status column, come into your actual, not up here, but down here in your actual comment, come down here and double click. And when you double click, let's just go ahead and agree with your comment. So let's say that there's an agreement, and you can see now all those statuses populate automatically. And so now what happens next is with the status, again, let's go ahead and double click again. And maybe, let's say that was coming from the architect, and the architect came back to you and said, hey, or the civil engineer, whomever, said, hey, they agree, they're going to incorporate it. And then you can say that, it's reconciled. And obviously that would be kind of the easy way out. And then eventually you'll make your way to close. But if there was a case where there was a disagreement, for example, you would come in here, maybe the AE disagrees and is not going to do it, but in some cases it's still reconciled because you and the AE had a conversation about how to fix it. So you can see these kind of indicate different things. But one other thing to note here is that some of these have the word reply in them, right? Per reply. You can see that kind of all over the place here, right? So when there is a need for more additional communication to happen, let's say the AE doesn't understand what I'm saying when I write, please update the sheet. They can go in and they can right click. So everyone can go ahead and right click here and then click reply and then add in another comment. So the idea here is not just for the AE to get information, but for kind of communication to happen in one place, right? So you can see now, that's interesting, this doesn't have a color. You can see now that some of these replies are coming in. You can kind of tell the replies over here. They have the little kind of curve here. So you can see them as they come in. You can see the people commenting here. And so the idea here is, let's say that, there is a comment, and let's say that TP made this comment, this should not be in this location. Let's say I'm the architect. I come back and I double click and I say, I disagree, it should be in this location. I'm an engineer and you're not, so this is what it should be. So, and then the idea is I would add a reply in here. I would right click and I would reply, and I would say, instead of maybe having these phone calls or something that people forget about, you could have all the information kind of happening here in the markups list. So basically that is kind of the customization that happens. and the communication that happens over time. So one last thing I want you guys to do, come back again and find your comment. So again, now you see it's getting a little more complicated to find yours. People are going to start maybe wanting to use that filter to maybe filter out. But go ahead and find that comment and then double click on it one last time. And you as the reviewers will eventually need to do a back check, right? So, right here, Chris, on, today at 12:26, he added this comment that there should be a third silo here. Eventually, there will be a back check set of drawings that will be issued by the architect or by the team. And then once that back check set is issued, Chris will come back in here and he's going to come to this page. He's going to come back to his bookmarks and he's going to come back to this particular page, or he'll open this up right here. He'll open this 30% set, and then in this documents, there'll be an additional set. So maybe he'll open up both of these sets here and he'll maybe split the screen right here so he can see the two side by side. And then he'll see those two side by side with, the 30% and then maybe the back check, whatever. He'll see that they've added that third storage silo. He'll come back then to his original comment asking them to add the silo. They did add the silo, so he'll come in here and he'll set it to closed. You can see he set that status to closed. So he'll just double click, set the status to closed, and when that happens, the comment will be closed. So what you can start to do is then, once you start going through that, then you can maybe even start looking at filtering. You can maybe filter, for example, just seeing you as the author. Let's say I wanted to see mine, or let's say I want to see Chris, so Chris's, and then I can maybe even filter statuses and look at all the ones that are closed, or maybe not look at the ones that are, or maybe look at the ones that maybe were set to open because they're still open. So you get the idea. By using this markups list down here, you can start to really have a true understanding of the kind of status of each one of the markup comments that have been made. So again, I'll reset this. I can set this to all, or I can just turn this off here and filter to see everything again. Okay, so it looks like we have some possible questions here. I'm going to go ahead and on my screen, my comment pop out as large and covers the drawing. How do I minimize, hide it? My comment pop out. Oh, it's really kind of dependent upon the screen resolution. I think I understand what you're saying when you try to make a comment in here. Let me see if I can comment on my own. I got to find my own thing here. Let's see if I can. Sorry, I will. So it gets kind of out of control here. I'll filter, or what I can do is I can filter my markups up here too, and then I can see. Yeah, I see. I think he's talking about this pop-up. I don't have an answer for that, unfortunately. It just sort of does that, and then sometimes also. Oh, I see a lot of people have closed these guys out. Let me go ahead and close it. Mine out. You notice what happens when they get closed. Notice what happens when when I've filtered out. You see all these turn gray, so I'm only seeing mine again. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that question. Let me come back. Let me see what else we have. What I'm going to do now is, I think we're pretty much done with training. If you guys want to go ahead and hang up now, you can. If you have additional questions, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, and I'll try my best to answer any questions that you might have. But for those of you who don't have any questions, we're done with the training. Thank you very much for coming, and we'll hopefully have a very smooth session that gets set up, and you'll all be invited to the session for the next coming Sand Island. Thank you, everyone. If you do want to unmute yourself and ask a question, feel free. But for the rest of you, thanks. And that covers everything.
Real quick question. This is Mike Rivas, Stantec.
Yeah.
Can you copy and paste from Excel and Word into Bluebeam?
Oh, that's a great question. Copying and pasting from Excel and Word into Bluebeam. The answer is yes, definitely you can. And it's really nice when you're, let's say, you're here in your tool chest and you're doing like a text box, and then you have a whole bunch of text you want to paste in. The answer is absolutely yes. You can do it that way to get the text into an actual comment. Or what you can also do is, even if you wanted to like use the snipping tool, for example, those of you who know Windows, you can actually snip out something and grab a piece and then copy it, and actually you can paste it into Bluebeam as well. You can see you can just paste just about anything in there. This comes in as a picture, which maybe is not ideal, but then pasting it into a text box is really nice. And actually, I'll show a little bonus tip here. Let's say that you have a bit of text that you want to bring in, let's say actually from the web. So you have let's just look at a California building code. And let's just say that I'm in here and I go through my California building code, whatever, and I grab a whole bunch of text from the web, right? I can just copy that text and come right in here, come into my little text box, paste that information in, right? And let's say I'm going to reuse that over and over and over. Once I do that, I can right click and then I can add it to the tool chest, right? And so you should have My Tools, which is kind of the one above the Sand Island tools. You can add it to My Tools, and then when you do there, now every time you go to a drawing, you can just drag that back out. So let's say that every single time that you are reviewing a set of drawings, you always copy in the same note, which is what a lot of people do. You can, again, just by creating that note once, right-clicking it, adding it to the tool chest. Once it's in the tool chest, then you can drag it out right there. And be careful that you don't double click it over here. Oops, because then it changes it. I don't know if it's a little hard to see, but make sure that you don't do that. Okay. That was your bonus tip. Any other questions? Okay.
This is Michael again, one more.
Okay.
Do we have sort or filter options by discipline? I see we can sort by author.
The answer is no, not really. Unfortunately, I'm assuming you're talking about markups. And the answer is unfortunately not, just because there is a way to do it, but it wasn't set up for this. It's a lot more complicated setup time to do it, but it's not. The answer is no, basically. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, you mean basically you'd have to just basically sort by author. And so again, just know that when these authors are here, once anyone's online, you can right click and you can always filter the markups to that person. Maybe it's a little easier than coming down here and going to filter and then going to author and then finding them here. So that's a little shortcut for you. Any other questions? So I think we're good. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. So thank you all. And if you have any additional questions,